You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Ever tried reading a French history journal with Google Translate? It's like deciphering the Rosetta Stone while someone yells baguette in your ear. But seriously, if you want to study history, learning French is practically a rite of passage. Why? Because some of the most groundbreaking historians, especially those Annales school folks, wrote in French, and their journals are still the holy grail for history nerds. Now, you might be thinking, but host, isn't English the language of the world? Yes, but try arguing with a French historian about medieval peasants in English, and you'll get the Gallic shrug of doom. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine failed an entire history course because she thought l'Ancien Régime was a fancy salad. So, if you ever want to understand why historians get misty-eyed over Fernand Braudel or why footnotes sometimes look like French poetry, you gotta bite the bulletin, the baguette, and learn the language. And yes, technical terms like historiography and primary source sound way cooler in French. Trust me, your academic street cred will skyrocket. All right, pop quiz. What's harder, conjugating French verbs or finding a parking spot in Paris? Spoiler, both will make you cry, but only one can be solved with Speakly. Speakly is a language learning app developed by two polyglots, basically, language superheroes who probably dream in Esperanto. It's not your grandma's flashcard app. Speakly uses spaced repetition, which is a fancy way of saying your brain finally remembers stuff, and contextual learning. Imagine learning words like archive and political theory while ordering croissants. That's practical vocabulary, not just the cat is on the table. You can tailor your learning, focus on speaking, writing, or reading pick your poison. Whether you need to survive a French lecture or just impress your Tinder date, Speakly's got your back. Plus, it's on mobile and web, so you can practice while pretending to work at your real job. Bonjour, productivity. So is it possible to be both a hardened criminal and a true believer in an ideology? Absolutely. In fact, most authoritarians are like Batman villain sequel parts gangster and obsessive monologuer. Take Horst Wessel, for instance. Nazi martyr? Sure. But also a gangster, a pimp, and the kind of guy who'd make Tony Soprano look like a choir boy. Some people think organized crime is apolitical, like the mafia just wants to sell bootleg vodka in peace. But in reality, organized crime and authoritarian politics are like peanut butter and jelly sticky, messy, and always found together. From Mussolini's mafia buddies to Stalin's street thug days, history is full of authoritarian leaders who moonlighted as criminals. Rule of law? More like rule of my law, my rules. Technical terms here, political brokerage, basically crime as a middleman for power and rule of law, which in these regimes is just a punchline. If you've ever wondered who Putin's favorite philosopher is, I'll save you some Wikipedia time. Ivan Ilyin. Not Dugin. Not Dostoevsky. Good old Ilyin, who's so influential Putin even repatriated his body talk about a VIP frequent flyer program. Ilyin is everywhere in Russian politics. Speeches, textbooks, even Netflix series. If there was a Russian Mount Rushmore, Ilyin would be there, looking stern and probably a little judgy. But why? Ilyin's big idea is that Russia is spiritually unique, a kind of holy snow globe, untouched by that nasty Western rationality. Now you might ask, isn't it weird to build a regime's ideology on the works of a guy who was basically exiled for being too spicy for both the Reds and the Whites? Well, welcome to Russian political philosophy. Let's break down Ilyin's two favorite concepts. Russian lawlessness, which sounds like a cowboy movie, but is actually the absence of rule of law, and spiritual innocence, which is just a fancy way of saying, we're never wrong, ever. Picture this, a country where the law is less blind justice and more peekaboo with the powerful. That's Russian lawlessness for Yuan tradition dating back to the Mongol yoke, when the Tsar's word was law, and the law was more of a suggestion. Russian intellectuals have spent centuries arguing about this. Some called it backwardness. Others, like Dostoevsky, saw it as a mystical advantage. Honestly, most of us would just call it a headache for lawyers. Ilyin took this chaos and said, actually, it's great. Rule of law is for weaklings. We Russians have spiritual strength, which is way better than a functioning court system. Now, imagine pitching that at a UN conference. We don't need laws. We have vibes. Technical terms, absolutist state, where the ruler is the law, an accountability mechanism, which, in this case, is probably just a stern look from grandma. Alright, here's where things go from quirky autocrat to theology major's fever dream. Ilyin's ideology is often called Christian fascism, think regular fascism, but with more incense and less pasta. He argued that God's creation was a kind of a mistake. No offense, God. Humanity's rationality and passions? Oops, only Russia, in its lawless glory, can restore divine order. That's right, Russian lawlessness is a blessing, not a bug. Ilyin's Russia is the eternal innocent like that kid who insists he didn't steal the cookies, even with crumbs all over his face. So every act of Russia, no matter how questionable, is righteous and pure. It's like diplomatic immunity, but for national guilt. Let's throw in two technical terms: sacred violence, violence blessed by God, and eternal innocence, the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. Imagine a society where social mobility is as rare as a Russian traffic cop giving directions. That's Ilyin's dream of static pyramid, with peasants at the bottom and a godlike leader at the top, waving at everyone to stay put. Middle class, Ilyin thought they were the worst, too ambitious, too mobile, too likely to ask, hey, why are we still peasants? His perfect economy is run by a tiny oligarchy not for innovation, but because it's easier to boss around a handful of billionaires than a million entrepreneurs. Efficient if you're a dictator, inconvenient if you're anyone else. Ilyin believed politics should be eliminated entirely. Elections? Sure, just vote for the leader, in public, with everyone watching. No pressure. Technical terms, social ossification, society stuck in place, and oligarchy, ruled by a few rich folks who probably own all the good vodka. Ready for a plot twist? Enter Lev Gumilev, a Soviet intellectual who explained Russia's uniqueness not just with history, but with, wait for it, cosmic rays. Yes, the kind you'd expect in a Marvel movie origin story. Gumilev argued that Westerners were corrupted by the sea and capitalism, while Russians, landlocked and peasanty, were pure, bound to the soil, and powered by Mongol cosmic energy. I swear I'm not making this up. He drew a line across Europe using meteorology and astrology, basically, a weather app with an attitude. Gumilev's theories also have a heavy dose of anti-Semitism, which is both false and toxic, but unfortunately, it was baked into Soviet political thinking. He rebranded Eurasianism as Marxist destiny, with Russia set to conquer the West and turn it into Mongolia. Yurt sales must be booming. Technical terms: Eurasianism, Russia as a unique civilization, and cosmic energy, not available at your local gas station. Now, let's talk about Carl Schmitt, the only lawyer in history who thought, what if we just didn't have laws? Schmitt was the legal mind behind Nazi Germany, but after the war, he took his talents to Spain because nothing says redemption like a sunburn. Schmitt's big hit was State of Emergency, a Permanent Crisis Mode, where the leader is above the law. Basically, the political version of because I said so. His theories are like catnip for would-be dictators. Sovereignty comes from breaking the rules, and you always need an enemy to rally the people. Compromise? That's for chumps. You can see Schmitt's influence everywhere from Pinochet's Chile to the Kremlin. If you hear a politician quoting Schmitt, it's time to invest in canned goods. Technical terms: state of exception, when laws go on vacation, and sovereignty. Absolute power, usually with poor impulse control. Carl Schmitt wasn't content with just wrecking domestic law, also had big ideas about world politics. Picture the globe as a giant risk board with great spheres controlled by big powers. Russia's sphere? Eurasia. Everyone else? Just background characters. Schmitt argued that international law is a shaman-thin cover for American imperialism. There's no real universal law, just power games and the occasional UN resolution nobody reads. Putin loves this stuff. Why bother with Ukrainian or Polish sovereignty when Moscow can just declare, sorry, you're in our sphere, house rules? Technical terms: sphere of influence, your bloc, your rules, and great power politics when countries act like middle school cliques. So next time you see a map, remember, to some, it's less about borders and more about who gets to put their flag on your lunchbox. Now, Western media loves to paint Alexander Dugin as the Kremlin's Rasputin. In reality, he's more like the hype man at a poorly attended fascist rally loud, but not exactly running the show. Dugin basically takes Ilyin, Gumilev, and Schmitt mixes them in a blender, and calls it his own recipe. The only thing original is his beard. He's less a mastermind and more of a brand manager. Think of him as the influencer of Russian fascism. He's famous in the West because, ironically, the Kremlin wants him to be. It's like a marketing campaign for authoritarianism. His English translator is literally married to an American fascist. You can't make this up. Dugin's main job: sell Russian fascism to anyone who will listen, preferably those with a podcast and a suspiciously large bookshelf. Technical terms: political technologist, a spin doctor with an attitude, and ideological branding, selling old ideas in new packaging, now with extra bluster. Let's wrap up with something wild. In 2017, Russian TV aired a series about Trotsky, told from Ilyin's perspective. It's fascist cinema, straight up, but most pop culture critics missed it, too busy analyzing Marvel movies for secret Nazi symbols. The show portrays the Russian Revolution as a Jewish conspiracy, with Trotsky as the puppet master and Stalin as his Franken-Golem. Did Netflix get a 2-for-1 deal on anti-Semitic tropes that day? Historians like Timothy Snyder were waving red flags, but most people were too distracted by the next big streaming binge. It's a lesson. If you want to spot real fascism, maybe listen to historians, not just YouTube essayists with 17-minute takes on Star Wars and the rise of authoritarian aesthetics. Technical terms, historical narrative, how you spin the past, and fascist aesthetics, not just cool uniforms. Folks, it's the story behind them that matters. Finally, let's talk about Western foreign policy, because what's funnier than watching European leaders assume capitalism will magically create democracy in Russia? Spoiler, it didn't, but it did create a lot of luxury dachas. Germany bought Russian gas, France sold weapons to dictators, and everyone acted surprised when democracy didn't break out like a rash. A classic moment. Russia's foreign minister said German reunification was illegal. Everyone laughed except him. He wasn't joking. Maybe it's time to take authoritarians at their word, instead of assuming they're just being colorful. Technical terms: market integration, the belief that trade cures all ills, and appeasement. Spoiler, it didn't work with Hitler, and it's not working now. So, next time you hear a speech about democracy and prosperity, check who's selling the tanks, and maybe, just maybe, listen to your local historian before Netflix releases its next big historical epic.